So anyway, very complex story actually, because when I went back there for Hillbilly Days, he said, I'd like you to come back in a few weeks because I'm getting married to Jessica. You saw the whole wedding scene there. And they'd been married in a civil ceremony like the year before, but he wanted to give her a nice wedding. So I ended up going back there, and their honeymoon was in D.C. as you saw. They tried to go talk to some congressman. Um, he was awarded a big award for his bravery for coming out with PTSD by the National Mental Health Association, I believe it was. But it was a big deal. It was in one of the hotels in D.C. and it was a big deal. There were a lot of people there, and it did show a lot of bravery, I think, on his part because, first of all, he's the poster boy of the Iraq War. Secondly, he's a Marine, and I think it was probably very difficult for him to come out and say that he had PTSD. But anyway, so the journey lasted with him almost 2 years, just following him around. And where the ethical questions came in for me was that I'm a journalist and I'm not supposed to really get involved in anybody's life. Like if somebody decides, hey, I want to kill myself, I'm supposed to actually not say, that's a bad idea. Let me help you. This just is, it's an ethical boundary that you do not cross as a journalist. You're there to document, you're not there to express your opinions on anything. You're just supposed to be kind of a fly on the wall. You can ask questions, take photographs, but definitely don't like tell people what to do. But we'd been through the same thing together, and I just thought that I didn't want the kid to be like a statistic, another statistic of Fallujah, like one of the 100 or so people killed there, and subsequently whoever committed suicide. And, the suicide rate in the military, especially among veterans of either Afghanistan or Iraq, is just out there. It's phenomenal. I mean, there's a lot of people killing themselves. So I ended up deciding to get involved. And I asked his wife, hey, help me out here. Where's the local VA? Has he been seeing anybody? And she said, no, but there's this guy from this program that's associated with Yale University in New Haven. And he's been calling, and he says, bring Blake up here, we'll help him out. So that's how we ended up driving to Connecticut. And again, that was like a very, very big step because I'm not supposed to be bringing people to hospitals. I mean, it sounds really cold, but that's just the way journalists work, right? I mean, we're not supposed to be getting involved in your life. We're supposed to be documenting your life, but we're not supposed to be telling you what to do, where to go. You do that all yourselves. We follow you around, we document your life. So we ended up going there, like the documentary says, he didn't end up staying very long. And then he moved to West Virginia, and he was just drifting around for a while. And I'd meet up with him, document his life a little bit, leave, come back, spend anywhere from 2 weeks or longer with him. And again, that went over 2 years. And so when 2007 rolled around, I was on vacation with my family up in the Northwest where I'm from, and I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to write this story. So I started writing the story. I mean, I hadn't written a story in years, and I was a pretty good writer, actually, when I first started out, because I did reporting and photography. But, at the LA Times, it's a lot more specialized. You choose one or the other. But I ended up writing a 2-part series that documented this whole, 2 years together. And I started putting the slideshow together myself, and then I ended up showing my editors, right? Oh, and I gotta say, the same editors that I'm talking about now, when they found out that I'd driven this kid to Connecticut and checked him into a hospital, they flipped out. They were just like, what are you doing? So I ended up trying to tell them, well, it's gonna be a better story. Because I'm involved now. They're like, no, that's not the point. We should probably take you off of this. And I was like, oh, good God. So I went back to Blake and I told him, look, they're going to take me off the story because I brought you up here. And he said, well, there's no story then. So I went back to my editors and told them, unless I do it, you're not going to get it, right? So they ended up relenting, and the story that came out, the written word story that came out in the LA Times was from a first-person perspective, from my perspective, whereas I think this video here is more from his perspective. So I encourage you, to look it up, the two-part story, and read that because it also gives you more insight. I mean, technically, the stuff isn't supposed to give you all the information in one place. You're supposed to watch the video or read the story, and so it all goes hand in hand. But anyway, by the time 2007 rolled around, I submitted the materials, like a rough draft and a rough draft of this video to my editors, and they said, "Oh my God, this stuff is really great," right? They were just like, they didn't believe it. I'd like gone off the radar for about 2 years with them on this story, and when I finally presented it to them, they just loved it. And to this day, that was like 10 years ago now, 9 years ago, but it's one of the most widely read stories in the LA Times, and this video, or the video that you just saw, has been seen lots and lots and lots the world over. So to update you on Blake, I talked to him 2 days ago on the anniversary, like I said, of when I took the photo, and it wasn't planned. I was like feeling a little weirdly down about stuff, so I just decided, hey, I better call him. And then that's when he reminded me, hey, I'm glad you called me on the anniversary date. And I was like, oh, it's today? So I had no idea, but he's doing better. He got back with Jessica. They've got 3 kids. He decided to really take the counseling and medication seriously, and he also has physical ailments from, when he was in the Marines, I think he weighed like 145 pounds or something, and he was carrying a backpack that was almost that much. So he's got some physical ailments, but he's trying to take care of that now. The only thing where I'm disappointed with Blake is that he hasn't done much aside from like being Mr. Mom. At one point, I think he could have like really been a spokesman for PTSD and really helped out other veterans by coming forward, maybe being part of an organization that reached out to veterans. But I think that he just chose that. I think that he was overwhelmed by the publicity that came with like him being the poster boy of the Iraq War. And I think to this day, he doesn't want that anymore. He just didn't like it when there was a lot of media around. He was okay with me because I took the photo and we were together in Iraq. But I think generally he's just really, really he got tired of being in the public eye. I wasn't the only one that did the story on him. The San Francisco Chronicle did a story on him. Rolling Stone magazine did a really big story on him. So, and the BBC, CNN, you name it. He's been everywhere. And to this day, my editors keep saying, hey, we got to do a follow-up on this guy. It's 10 years after that. And whenever I ask him, he says, no, I'm going to pass. So the thing that I really am a little disappointed with him is I think that he could have used the GI Bill, GI benefits, to maybe go to school. And at one point, he came out here and we were talking, and he's a good-looking guy. And I said, maybe you should like take some acting lessons or something. But it was always just a conversation, and it never really went anywhere. And I don't know why, but maybe this is his way of like just coping with it, right? Some people get intensely busy. Like, I think I went the opposite way. I'm intensely busy all the time. I file photos every day, and that's kind of an unusual thing for me and my colleagues. But I make sure that I have the discipline to like turn something in every day. And this is the way I kind of like deal with that whole thing. But again, I think his way of dealing with it is that he has completely withdrawn from the world except his small corner of it. Anyway, I would like to open it up to questions now, if that's okay. What do you think, Anahita?
Of course, yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much. That's
Oh, I just want to give a shout out to Media Storm. They're the ones that eventually produced this because, like I said, once I turned the material in, the editors were like, oh, this is great. Let's go ask Media Storm to do it for us. So it was nice because I got to go to New York at the time. Media Storm was based there, and spent a wonderful week there working with them. And they actually came out with this very, very nice presentation.
I think they are collecting the questions. There were some cards given to you if you want to write down. Please print really. My handwriting is really bad. I would not want you to read my handwriting. So if you print it really well so I can read it. It's okay. Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank you again for this wonderful presentation. You also updated me. I just want, if you ever talk to Blake, let him know that we believe, at least my students and I, that his purpose has been educating us about PTSD. This documentary that you've made has so much in it to be used for PTSD. The things he says visually, what we see. So his purpose has been great. Maybe he wasn't the poster, he doesn't want to be the poster boy the way that media calls it, but he has definitely been a tool and an instrument for myself for the past few years to educate my students, and many of them love this documentary. So, yeah, and
Well, that's it has been seen very wide and far. So, yes, I think you're right. Maybe that was his purpose.
yes, it is his purpose. And by the way, Mr. Mom is okay. There's nothing wrong to be a with a Mr. Mom. You know, yeah, so that's definitely his way of healing, you know, to take joy with the kids. And as little as the corners that we live in the world, it's still our world. So I wouldn't mind to be in that beautiful geographical for at least even a month and just be there and isolate it. So anyways, thank you again for all of this. Do you think war veterans really get the help they deserve?
Well, I think that there probably could be more done for veterans. I understand that it's difficult to sometimes get services from the VA hospital. I know that I think Blake was lucky just because he is well known, and if there is a problem, he can basically say, hey, I'm the Marlboro Marine. So I think it helps him, but I do know that it's sometimes very difficult to get help from the VA. Now, I also know that there's a lot of people, I think at the time I was doing the research for this story, that 30% of the returning Iraq and Afghan war veterans are suffering from PTSD. I don't know, it might be higher. I mean, 1% of the population of America has fought the wars for the last 15 years. 1%. That means a lot of these guys, women too, are going back again and again and again. I cannot imagine it gets much easier. And maybe it does, but maybe it just hardens you or numbs you even more. We are in a political climate and an economic climate where I don't think there's a lot of money apart from money to fund the war. I know that in looking at my kids who go to public schools, I see the facilities and the programs could be better. Let's just say could be better. The more resources could be channeled this way. Unfortunately, we have war commitments around the world. 50% of the discretionary budget goes to defense. There are defense industries and installations in all 50 states. We have troops in 80 plus or more countries around the world. So I think that it's probably, I don't want to guess, but I am going to have to say that maybe the VA is going to have a hard time dealing with all the cases of PTSD, and I'm sure they already are.
Thank you. How did you find the Iraqi people and their attitude towards the U.S.?
The Iraqi people, The Iraqi people were not big fans of Saddam Hussein unless you were like involved in his circle somehow. They welcomed us as liberators when I was first there. They welcomed us with open arms. But I think that probably has changed by now because it's a long time later. It's 12 years later, and the war has not stopped for them. The war has gotten more severe. You know, it morphed from Saddam to Al-Qaeda to ISIS now. And my alma mater, the University of Washington, one of the medical people there did some research, and conservatively, she says 1 million Iraqi people have died as a result of our invasion and occupation. We didn't kill them all, but the conditions that we set up, the country's in ruins. I mean, the country is just in ruins. And sectarian violence is rife. And I'm sure that by now that 1 million estimate is way low. There was just an invasion in Mosul, and I think it's still ongoing. And they were expecting hundreds of thousands of refugees, people to be displaced from that. And God knows how many of them are going to get killed. So I don't think the Iraqis are really, I don't know what their personal feelings are about us, but I can't imagine they're very happy with what we've done to their country.
Okay. The next question is, as a journalist, do you feel you may have suffered from PTSD or other mental health issues?
Yeah, I'll admit it. I've sought some therapy, and yeah, I mean, it's. I see a lot of trauma. I mean, I've basically spent 30 years covering big stories, and big stories often involve some kind of violence or trauma. I mean, even, like 4 or 5 months ago, I got assigned to cover a KKK rally in Anaheim, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be kind of easy because the cops will have some sense and they'll put the KKK over here and they'll put the counter KKK over there and they'll put barricades in between them and they'll say, if anybody crosses these barricades, we'll crack their heads open. Well, guess what? The cops never showed up. So they just launched into each other, and 3 people got stabbed, and 1 guy was beaten almost to death. And I was just like, I'm photographing the whole thing. You guys can look it up on Twitter. It got like lots and lots and lots of retweets and views. So this job has a lot of that if you choose to go down that path. I mean, there's some people that work for the LA Times, all they shoot are celebrity portraits. There's some people, all they shoot is food. There's some people that shoot only sports. But if you're gonna do the news thing, I mean, even going to what happened around the time of Fallujah, like sort of around that time, Katrina happened. I mean, you're going to places where there's dead bodies floating in the water. There are people facing incredible hardship. Yeah, it affects you, right? I mean, it definitely affects you, especially as there's an accumulation of it after 30 years. There is an organization called the Ockberg Society. I haven't checked into them lately, but they do help journalists who have PTSD. I think it's funded by the Dart family, the people that make these cups. So I don't know where they're at, but people are trying to really look at the trauma that journalists face. I mean, as far as the LA Times, I don't think they've ever really addressed it. They just say, take a month off, and that's it. And I actually had the opportunity to be in Libya in 2011 in Benghazi. Everybody talks about Benghazi, and I think I'm one of the only people that's been there, really. But You know, it was weird there because we were with civilians that were taking up arms against the government. So we're hanging out with the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. We're not talking about Marines here. We're not talking about Army. We're talking about, like, I get the wild idea and I say to you people, hey, look, here's a bunch of AK-47s. Let's go take over. Let's go kill the president, right? So that's exactly what happened in Libya, and nobody knew anything. Nobody knew what was going on, and it was super, super, super dangerous. And I remember calling, more dangerous than Iraq. And I remember calling my editor saying, hey, there's something happening in Ras Lanuf tomorrow. I don't think I want to be there because they're ready. Gaddafi's guys are ready, and they're waiting for us. And one of my editors said, really? Why don't you just hang out with a group of other photojournalists, right? You guys can all go in together. And I said, that's just a false sense of security because I could die by myself or I could die with a group of photojournalists. And so then he passed me on to another photo editor, and that photo editor said, oh, you know, if you can just hang for a few days, we could probably get Carolyn in there. And Carolyn Cole, the woman that won in Liberia, won the Pulitzer Prize in Liberia. And I just said, you guys are not getting it. You're not getting it. I'm telling you, it's so incredibly dangerous that it doesn't matter if it's me, it's Carolyn, it's Superman, somebody's going to get hurt here. And a lot of photojournalists got hurt in Libya. Two famous ones were killed. So it was very, very dangerous. Libya was much more dangerous than Iraq. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, oh, a lot. I just wanted to welcome Board of Trustees Vivian here. Thank you so much for coming here. Yeah, it's wonderful. Sure. Do you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Usually don't need a microphone. Do you need me to use one? It's recorded. I don't know if they're recorded. Hi, I just want to welcome, I know your name. I want to welcome Luis Cinco here personally for two reasons. One, because I am a journalism professor, and because we have a journalism program here that actually offers a photojournalism class. So we're very proud to have you. And I know that many of us, I'm looking at the audience, and several of my colleagues and I, we attended the PTSD training that was offered on campus so that we could better serve our students. So to have somebody, an embedded reporter who was actually in the field, who was actually taking photos and sharing with the world what was happening from the front line is such a privilege to us. So, yeah, absolutely. So thank you. And the best part is I'm seeing some of our journalism students here, so it's really energizing to see that. Thank you very much. I rushed over here as fast as I could to make sure that I was able to meet you, and thank you, everybody.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Well, I think in follow-up of talking about photojournalism, here is a question from Lisette Mendoza. The reason I'm saying the name of this student is because she is a photo editor from Viking newspaper, student in journalism here. Where is she? Oh, hi, how are you? So she says that mentally, how do I mentally prepare, or how do you mentally prepare yourself for covering events such as a war?
There are many ways to do it mentally. Let me address that first. But you know, the LA Times tried to give people some kind of training going in, and usually this training is by company. One of the bigger companies is called Centurion, and it's like ex-military people, and they just basically teach you the very basics of what you need to do. You know, like tourniquets and covering sucking chest wounds and stuff like that. But mentally, I don't know. I don't really know. Like I say, we're so into getting, the people who are very motivated in this job are so into being part of the big story that sometimes we don't really like think it all the way through. You know, we just go do it. I know that when I was in Fallujah, I think my youngest daughter was probably about 6 months old. I had really young kids at that time. Even though I was in my mid-40s, I got off to a late start. But it's very difficult. very difficult. And I think mentally, I don't know how to do it, but I know that it's even more difficult for women, I think, to be journalists or photojournalists because you cannot be gone as a mom, I think, for like 4 or 5 months at a time. You know, I mean, think of the baby's daddy pulling his hair out, right? So I don't know. I think it's very difficult. This is a very difficult profession. Like I say, if you choose to be in the big stories, it could be very, very difficult, particularly for women. Like I say, I mean, it's like photojournalism side of it is dominated by men. It's a very physical job. You have to carry around equipment a lot. But mentally, I don't think that's ever been really addressed in this profession. Like nobody gives you any kind of like psychological prep or psychological mental health help afterwards. Like I say, it's like I got back from Fallujah. They're like, take December off. Isn't that great? I'm like, yeah, that's great. And then I go to the mall to go shopping, and people are like honking at me to get to a parking spot. And I'm just like, maybe I do need more. But anyway, yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. I just wanted to say something about being prepared for war. I have to tell you from personal experience that there's really no way anyone can prepare for war, whether you're a journalist or a soldier. I remember just being at dinner table and hearing the sirens, and then it would be, pitch dark, and then we had to be in bomb shelters and, spend the whole night in the bomb shelter, and coming out of the bomb shelter, and you see the neighborhoods gone, and the newspaper publishes the names of the people who are killed, and you see neighbors. It's just a surreal experience, as if you're living in a movie. You keep asking yourself, is this really happening? It's a acute stress, constant, and being in a sense of urgency, and it hits you when things are kind of like quiet down. There is really no way of preparing for that. So I just wanted to share that with you, if that helps. But I do take my hat off for journalists that have the bravery to record this for us, whether they are prepared for it or not. So this question says, since there are so many men, and I believe some women, on Skid Row who are veterans, are there any serious outreach to assist these men and women, and how can LA Times bring this issue to the light?
I know that we've done stories on homeless veterans. I know that there have been a lot of stories about homeless veterans. Well, not a lot, but stories about homeless veterans, especially around the Westwood facility. I mean, for the longest time, they were living in on the side of the highway where all that landscaping was, the bushes and stuff. But where I noticed it is when they widened the freeway and they got rid of the bushes. Man, it was like there were a lot of people living in there. But what was the first part of the question, Anhita?
I think it was that there are many homeless women and there are men and women that are veterans. Has there been a serious reach out, and how can LA Times bring it to the light?
I don't know of any outreach programs. You'd have to talk to one of the homeless reporters, the homeless beat reporters on that one. But again, the LA Times is doing its part. I mean, we have a lot of homeless stories now, stories about the homeless, because just looking at it visually, I think the population of homeless people has exploded. I mean, I just see homeless people everywhere now. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question completely, but we are trying to really cover the homeless issue.
Wonderful. Yeah.